it's actually being recognized sometimes from your peers and colleagues. Especially in Pakistan, we are a little behind the curve. Like in other countries, as women get more involved in the workplace, the shared responsibility for domestic care is kind of ends up being shared. Whereas in Pakistan, the burden is still very firmly resting with women. And we also, as a society, which is very, it's also a blessing in a way that we are so connected, but with that connection comes a lot of social protocol and pressure and the need to be visible in community events, and that can also kind of bring its own set of challenges, and the burden again falls on women, whereas people are much more understanding and forgiving of men not matching those expectations, even socially. With women, even if someone knows you're a working woman, the expectations can be different. So it is a challenge, and like I think I agree that that change happens right from your schooling. I think it's about raising that awareness, setting up curriculum in a way where we are supporting our people in terms of helping them think about this differently. Once you're 35 or 40, you're fairly set in your ways, and it's very difficult to again change someone at that age. But अगर schooling से शुरू हो जाए, I think it's hard also for corporates to kind of intervene with personal lives. I think that's kind of a stretch. But what one can do is do um, awareness raising campaigns and show maybe men who are more proactive can kind of serve as role models for their community. One of the things we do, I mean, I've transitioned from, my previous role was for a large nonprofit, and that was more around, as an example, reproductive health. So slightly different topic, but even within that, one of the things we would do is have male champions kind of have this dialogue with their male peers and friends, and kind of become an influence in that society. So there are initiatives that can be taken, but I think the important thing is that it has to be done, probably handled quite sensitively. It's not easy. We're culturally quite set in our ways, but I think equally, you know, Pakistan is a place where it's a mixed bag. There are people who are changing and transitioning to a more, to embodying that shared value, whereas there are other people who are, still kind of very traditional in their point of view. And this is also referring to one thing Dr. Abdul Wahab also talked about around, encouraging women to be leaders at a younger age. And again, I think schooling plays a big part. TK, we have structural and cultural challenges, but that's where your schools and your institutions with the right curriculum can serve as influences at a very early age. And that, then enables, and your school then also becomes with leadership, there's a matter of confidence as well. Your ability to express yourself, ability to demonstrate your talents, the confidence to do so. And that can be nurtured in schools as we nurture the talent of our younger generations and encourage them to speak out, encourage them to, set healthy boundaries. And again, for my own trajectory, one of the things I had to learn through my career is the ability to speak like appropriately, because maybe culturally we come from a society. Most of my career has been outside of Pakistan, but culturally we come from a place where, as an example, we are, and it's for the better that we have this thing that we are very respectful of our, or people who are older to us or more senior to us in age. That's an example. However, I've worked in places where you needed to be, yes, continue to be respectful, but you needed to be able to voice your opinion, bring your opinion to the table, not just get stuck with well, they are senior to me, therefore they are saying this, and therefore it is gospel. You had to move away from that thinking. So, that also takes, that the confidence to be able to express yourself while not, being disrespectful to your peers and colleagues. These are all skills which kind of, they're the softer skills. And I think another recognition maybe in our institutions, and I know that there are a couple of initiatives which have been designed to address this as well in Pakistan, which is often we are grooming our talent academically, but what's not happening is we're not looking at the soft skills as much. We're not looking at how we engaging at universities. We might be progressing and doing brilliantly at university, but sometimes those people are we've done really well, but we're not workplace ready in terms of our softer skills. And I apologies, I forget the name of the, one of the ventures that, I'm quite aware of, which do this, this exercise around grooming individuals, kind of fill that gap between a university education and a workplace in terms of, your soft skills. But all these are all things which are also learned behaviors, and they can be influenced at the right time with the right messaging, maybe in the workplace, but very importantly at a young age, at schooling, at the schooling level. So I will kind of agree with, what's been said. I think we need more campaigns which encourage that, people to speak out and voice their opinions, and also the ability to do it without reaching any, like offending people or unnecessarily being disrespectful, that kind of thing. To become champions for other, then women are likely to become champions for other women. And I think that was just the competitive nature of, being a woman in the workplace. And now that is changing. And I feel that there are many more female champions who are champions for other women, which is, very encouraging. Um, the other thing, it's an interesting, like, when we talk about we talk about bias and conscious and unconscious bias. Another, like, again, it's an attitude shift around how we package women and their behaviors. So I once was involved in a executive course on female leadership. And one of the examples that always stuck with me was when, it's a Harvard study about women who are, about people, when an organization is about to employ an individual, and if they employ the individual that they've placed an offer to, if they are a male and they negotiate back, and if it's a female, if they negotiate, what is the impact on perception? And the study showed that if the female negotiated her pay package, as an example, and this, I think benefits and pay package is an important part of the equation, that equal pay for equal work. As a female is negotiates, she is more likely to be perceived as being difficult to work with. Whereas a man, when he negotiated, it had no impact on the perception of who he might be as a person in terms of the ability to work with that person. So it's interesting, and it kind of goes into, as we talked about, mentorship, raising awareness, and having male allies. This raising, addressing these unconscious biases that actually, just as a man might negotiate his pay package or negotiate his position, we should also be equipped, encouraged to negotiate become our own champions as well. We, like that doesn't happen quite as often, that we are not encouraged to become our own champions. And if we do become our own champions, we're perceived as being difficult. Like that's, it's a loop, but that's where your male allies and their support and that kind of embodiment also is very helpful. So just to kind of talking to that point around, you talked about male allies, and I think that's a key piece of the pie as well. I think, increasingly in terms of corporate culture, when we talk about emotional intelligence, they say, like especially in the corporate culture, there is more of a push towards EQ over IQ as well, or like IQ is important, of course. But in any corporate setting, whether you're male or female, I think that level of emotional intelligence does enable you much more to kind of go further. I'll give an example, and again, this is an example of perhaps, when I was starting my career, me not quite getting, understanding, like trying to navigate, a large organization and figure out how can I demonstrate my, speak up and demonstrate my capability to my managers and my peers. And a female manager of mine at the time, she gave me this kind of, and I think this is where emotional intelligence does come into play, because this is where and it's both in terms of the work remit and in terms of how you interact with people. She kind of said to me, well, actually, the best way to move forward, move into your next step up to your next role is to not just if you have a manager, I was a junior resource at the time, reporting to a manager level resource, was to start acting into, like stepping into the role of the manager. And that way it gives the manager the ability to step up. And what I interestingly what I found about that piece of advice was more than the tasks that you're doing, it's actually lending yourself to trying to understand, well, what are the team dynamics, what are the people around me, how can I work, whether it's your clients, your peers, your juniors, your seniors, how can I enable their work in a way, how can I make their working lives better and therefore, help them succeed and myself succeed. So that's where emotional intelligence does come into play. It has a very strong role. Coming into work and maybe delivering on your piece of work on its own in entirety, it'll tick a box, but it won't give you the platform to grow. So I agree that emotional intelligence, and women tend to lend themselves much more to EQ. There is a fine balance that maybe where women can be much more empathetic than they need to be sometimes in the workplace, and that can be to their disadvantage. But I think that mix of EQ and IQ is important where whatever your gender role. But in women, that's a strength almost. We kind of, as the nurturers of society, we tend to embody that much more. And so it's a very valid point that you've raised.
Thank you.
So it's a good question. I think mine will be a little bit more tempered. It depends on what the organizational need was. I think the whole point, I agree with the Sadak Saab's point of view, because women have been so unfairly disadvantaged that sometimes unfairly advantaging them is required to help them catch up. In the same time, I think maybe there are other solutions in place. If there's an urgent need, organizational business priority, maybe there are temporary solutions you can find, whether it's a short-term resource or as Musadak Saab said, that like some kind of gap fill from within the team to allow, especially if the female candidate was the candidate, then it's, we give her that opportunity. The other thing I will say, and again, to me, be gender neutral in this case, is that often, sometimes when we make these decisions and we hire, maybe out of desperation or because we desperately needed someone and it wasn't the right fit, what you're doing is in the longer term, you're impairing the organizational culture. Because you've brought in maybe the wrong, not the right fit, like not the fit you might have wanted. And one of the things I say for my own organization as well is that I can be very, I think it's important to be discerning and almost protective about who you're hiring into. Like when I hire in directly to my team, I would rather wait and work with a smaller team and wait for the right fit than hire people in just because we needed an urgent something filled in. And I know that that's a little bit more of a burden for the existing team. But it means that, for many reasons, you're also not impairing the culture of the organization. So you're kind of saying, well, actually, the right fit over anything else, and that will, in the longer term, have dividends. But equally, if there was a very urgent business requirement, then it really all depends on business needs. Sometimes you need a stopgap. You could do a 3-month contract, or you can do a short-term resource or other solutions. But if you found that the female candidate was the right candidate, then, and actually this happened to me, interestingly, and I was very surprised. My job before this one, I'm going to give you a personal anecdote. I was in London at the time and I was offered a job, and this organization that I was interviewing with, I was working somewhere else and I knew that contract was ending, so I had to interview somewhere else, and I was working under significant pressure. So I was actually late for my interview. I was a half an hour late for my interview, which is not a good look. And went in, interviewed, and the organization gave back to me that even though you were late for the interview, we thought you were the best candidate. Then they needed someone within 2 weeks, and I had some paperwork which needed to be finalized before I could join the organization, which meant they would have to wait a couple of months. But they actually waited. Like as an example, they actually waited to hire me, and which I thought was a really positive signal for me